This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio, episode 764. This week we welcome Dr. Jacob Avila from Middle Tennessee State, and for a show we're calling the Restoration Industry's Second Act with Higher Education. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. And don't forget, after the show, we continue the conversation on afterthoughts.iaqradio.com. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are the Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at eia-usa.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com, EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick at cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to report that Dawn Weeks from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, was first to identify 501c6 as the IRS designation for organizations that are not organized for profit and primarily serve the interests of their members, such as trade associations, business leagues, and chambers of commerce. Here's today's IAQ Radio Trivia question. According to the popularity of their Wikipedia pages, who is Mid-Tennessee State University's #1 alumnus? Back to you, Joe.
All right, Dr. Jacob Avila's industry experience spans over 17 years in the construction industry. Prior to his transition to academia, he served as an executive vice president and general manager of California Construction, a family-owned construction firm specializing in disaster restoration and government contracting. He is a scholar-practitioner, is committed to enhancing the work of the restoration industry professionals through applied research. Since 2008, he's taught in business, engineering, and construction programs at the graduate and undergraduate level. And prior to coming to Middle Tennessee State, he served at two other institutions as an associate professor, business department chair, MBA program director, and program director in a college of engineering. Welcome to IAQ Radio, Dr. Jake. Dr. Jake, how about telling our audience a little bit about your background in the construction business? Give us a little overview of your family history in the restoration industry in Southern California.
Absolutely. So it really started with my dad. He got into the construction industry in the 80s, worked for a restoration contractor. And then in 1990, he decided to start his own restoration business. And so him and my mom, they both did that from the downstairs bedroom of our home. And so it started out as a home-based business. And so I'm the oldest of four. And got exposed to restoration at a very young age. So, I remember many times just as a young kid growing up, going and walking losses with my dad, everything from fire jobs to water damage. And then, because everything was also happening in the very beginning in our home, just seeing how my dad would scope losses, and he'd go out and walk losses with adjusters. He'd bring back his notes, and this is going to really date us, but, he would have the secretary type it up on a typewriter. And what was amazing is I remember being a kid and hearing my dad come in and talk to my mom about Xactimate. And so I can't remember what year it was exactly, but I remember him telling her, hey, this is going to be the future of the industry. we got to get on this bus. And so he did, and obviously, we're also familiar with it now. So he did that. And, I can remember when I first started writing estimates, I was using the DOS version of Xactimate. So, um, I've forgotten all of the quick codes, but like, I just remember, we had them memorized, and we would just, as we were estimating, we would just use the codes. But um, so that's really, I mean, that's where it started. Both
Is
my
it?
parents are just they're very entrepreneurial, very enterprising. They're awesome people. And they didn't force us into the business by any means. They always let us know that the business was there. And while I'm not in the day-to-day operations of the family business anymore, I'm always grateful of just the opportunity I had to work with my dad on a daily basis. Like, it was awesome. It was great learning from him, seeing him operate as a business owner, learning about restoration from my dad. He's just yeah, they're both fantastic.
Is he still in the business?
He is, yeah. So my younger brother is now running it. His name's Aaron, and he's doing a fantastic job. Yeah, and my dad's still involved with it, but then he does other things too.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey into higher education. You're now Dr. Avila, and you've got a professorship at Middle Tennessee State. How did you decide to get more involved in the academia?
Yeah, so I fell into it, and that wasn't like a part of a huge plan or anything like that. It wasn't even on my radar really. So as a local business owner in our town, I was invited to sit on a couple advisory boards for a university. And one of them was for a degree program in entrepreneurship, and then the other one was a degree program in real estate development and construction management. And it was after one of our advisory board meetings one day, one of the other board members was a department chair for the community college in town, right? So they brought him as one of the local stakeholders as well, and just to advise on the programs. And he was a great guy, and just a great friend. And he had approached me and said, "Hey, the semester's getting ready to start," and he had an instructor that had bailed on him last minute right before the semester started. And so he said, "I need somebody to cover this entrepreneurship class for a semester. Are you up for it?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I gave it a go. And I could say from the very first night that I was in class, this is my first time, teaching in any environment or anything like that. I fell in love with it, and it was just an awesome experience. And I remember I got home that night, and I was just really excited when I was talking to my wife about it. And I said, "Hey, this is awesome. I love, being in the classroom. I love the encounters with students, the conversations we had, even that first night of class." And I told my wife that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. And
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
well, I saw somewhere, maybe in your bio, you were over in England at one point.
So during my master's program, I had the opportunity to take a class at Oxford University,
Interesting.
and it was a collaboration that the university had with Oxford, to where they would send us in groups, and we could just take a class over there, which
And
was
where were you?
awesome.
What school were you at the time?
So at that time, I was at California Baptist University working on my MBA.
Okay,
Yeah. And then I
interesting.
did my bachelor's degree at Pepperdine University, and then my doctorate is in policy planning and development from the University of Southern California.
Very interesting.
So when I got home, and my wife and I had that conversation, we had a good conversation about just what I would have to do, which meant I would have to go back to school to get a doctorate in order to teach at the university level. And so we did that. Went back to school, finished my doctorate, and at this time I was also and working in the business. I also got two contractors licenses. So in the state of California, they're both inactive, but I have a general contractor's license, which is a B license, and then I also have a C15, which is for flooring. Um,
Interesting.
but but yeah, so went back, did the formal education, and when I did the when I made the transition, right? So one of the things that you have to do when you become a professor is, you know, you have to do research and write academic papers, and that's part of the job. Like I love what I do in the classroom, and then when you look at the, you know, that other piece of it, I do enjoy the research. But one of the challenges is, you know, when you see a lot of these studies that academics publish, quite often it ends up being just a conversation amongst academics. So they'll publish
Hmm.
these papers, they'll do this research, and then it really doesn't get outside of that. And I've always wrestled with that. And I made a commitment to myself that if, well, as I was taking on that work, that I would not do that, right? So I would do the academic work, but I also wanted to look at the practical implications of that work. And so I wanted to bridge this gap between theory and practice, right? So having practice informed theory and theory informed practice, and making sure that it wasn't going to be a conversation that just died amongst academics, but that there were going to be practical implications for people in industry. And with that, I committed to having all my research focus on the restoration industry. And so what I would do is I would go to all of our industry conferences, I would talk to restoration contractors, and I asked them, hey, what is important to you all? And what would you be excited for somebody to do research on? And so whatever was interesting and exciting to the industry, I took interest in, and I made that my priority. I made that my passion. So we had some focus groups for our first study, and the feedback that I got is there's a lot of family-owned restoration businesses, and so everybody wanted to know more about family business dynamics and how it relates to the restoration industry, so we could have healthier family business in the industry and overall have a healthier industry. And so I became a family business expert, and as much as I could by, you know, diving into the literature, you know, so reading all the academic stuff, all of the practical professional literature, talking to all the family business consultants. We had family business consultants that we had hired to work with us in our family business. So I even talked to some of them. And then we had our first study that was published. John Downey had published it when IICRC had its peer review journal, and so we published the findings from that study there. The next one we did was related to employee burnout. So again, I had more focus groups with restoration contractors. I got feedback from the industry, and the industry said, "Hey, we would like to know more about burnout, employee burnout within the restoration industry." And so we did that study. And with that study, that was actually, to my knowledge, that is that was the first study related to the restoration industry that was published in an A journal. And what I mean A journal, just a top tier journal. And so that was through the American Society of Civil Engineers, and it was their Journal of Construction Engineering and Management. And so that was an exciting thing for us. And with that, we learned that estimators were really burned out within the industry. So we had a follow-up study that looked at estimator burnout. And so with each one of these, you know, I would do the academic study, and then we would have spin-off articles, right, through Restoration and Remediation magazine, so R&R magazine, that they would publish, that would allow us to write it up in a different way, less academic, more applied in nature. And then that's how we were able to distribute our findings to the industry so everybody could see what we found and understand the context of the study. And so it was a much broader conversation, and it wasn't a conversation that was just isolated amongst academics.
We've promoted that whole research to practice thing for years now, and but one of the problems I found, and maybe you could help us understand a little better, how do you find money for that type of research?
Yeah. Yeah. So to be candid, Les Cunningham, and I cannot thank Les enough, because it is very expensive when you do a study. So for example, if we want to know, well, we wanted to know about family business dynamics, and there's a lot of instruments out there. When I say instruments, it's like questions for surveys, and there's a lot of inventories that you can take, but you want to use instrumentation that has been validated, that it's been used, and where you have good normative data, and when it comes time to use those, they're all copyrighted, right? Some of the best ones are, and so you have to pay money in order to do that. And so Les is somebody that from the very, very beginning has just been a strong supporter of everything that we've done. And so whenever we had an expense like that, or we needed travel or anything like that, Les Cunningham Business Networks, they would write checks to cover all of those costs. And it does get very expensive. So for the family business study, and sometimes I went to Les and it was almost a request where I'm like, hey, I need a blank check. And because the challenge is, so for that family business study, you pay per use. Going into the study, you don't know how many people are going to respond until you get it all at the end. And then they add up how much you're going to owe them, and then you have, and then you pay for how many people used it. And in that instance, as we were talking to the various industry publishers and people that were going to help us distribute those surveys, some of the numbers we got were, okay, this is going to reach 19,000 people. Okay, well, that's a lot of people, and so yeah, so that was something that we had to figure it out, and and actually that brings to light something else. So I would just encourage everybody in the industry, whenever we have a survey that comes out, and it's not just for anything that I would do, but I think anyone doing research for the restoration industry, I would just encourage everybody to give strong consideration to participating, because the more data we get, the more we learn, and the more information whoever's doing the research or the survey, there's a lot of valuable information we can have at our hands to just learn more about the industry.
Hey,
Solve
Jake.
problems.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, it's our understanding that you know Randy Rapp now from his work at Purdue School of Technology and Construction Management. Can you
Right.
talk about your relationship with Randy and how that might provide some insight and guidance to help you with your work at MTSU?
Right. Yeah. So Randy and I, we've known each other for years. And I want to say, gosh, maybe back to 2014-ish. And I can't remember exactly how we connected. But I would say that's when our friendship started, and somewhere in there, 2014 or 2015. And I think it started with just, hey, I'm doing research on the restoration industry, and so gosh, I'm trying to remember who all of our authors were on that first study. I can't remember if Randy was involved with the first one. Randy was definitely involved with the second study that we did on employee burnout in the restoration industry. So we co-authored that one together. I think Francois Jacobs was another researcher that was involved with that. And so Randy and I, we collaborated on articles, academic articles, and then even some of the articles that we did for the industry magazines. And so we would usually touch base on those types of things, just those writing projects that we're working on. And then now Randy and I have a contract with Purdue University Press, where we are now working on the second edition of the textbook that he had done for the restoration program at Purdue University years ago. And that's work that we're getting started pretty soon here.
And that's something you'll use in your program?
Ideally, yes. Yeah. So it's something that we would use here, and then it's something that Purdue has already been using, to my understanding.
And is Purdue going to continue doing work in that area?
I believe so. I believe so.
Okay. All right. Now Pete helped facilitate a meeting with you and Randy at the RIA convention this past April. What can you share about any lessons learned in your meeting with Randy and his days at Purdue? How is that going to help you advance your plan at Middle Tennessee State?
Yeah. So I'll step back just a second here, just to provide a little more context. So every time I go and speak at these conferences and share our research, so whether it was family business or it was employee burnout or estimator burnout, the feedback that I've gotten every time has been the same, which is all the contractors come up and they say, "Hey, thank you so much for doing this research on the restoration industry. We appreciate everything that you're doing, but what can you do to help us find more people, more young people to plug into the industry?" Right? That's the big problem. And so when we looked at starting this program at MTSU, I had to look at, okay, what position am I in my role at MTSU to help the industry solve this big problem of not having enough people in the pipeline, right? And that's just every conference we go to, it just seems like that's always one of the sidebars. There's always multiple sessions, breakout sessions related to how do we fill this pipeline, right? And it's not just technicians, it's how do we fill the pipeline all the way to the top, right? There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions and a lot of companies expanding, so they need operations managers and general managers and leads and project managers. And so there's a need all the way up the chain for restoration companies. And so as Randy and I have talked, and when he and I were talking at these conferences most recently, I think we both agreed that's just something that the industry needs to try and figure out how to solve, and we want to be a part of that solution. And just in that dialogue that he and I were having, I think one of the things that we consistently land on is it's not going to be solved by university degree programs. University degree programs, I think, are an important piece to it. And I think that they can be a part of this larger fix to it. But the reality is we're going to need the restoration industry, right? All of us to be reaching out to high schoolers, community colleges, trade schools, four-year universities, right? As we're out in the community, just educating more people on the exciting work and opportunities that are in the restoration industry and getting that message out, right? And so one of the things that's been a huge topic in my conversations with Randy is realizing, hey, this is an important piece. This will elevate the industry, but the industry needs to tackle this in a much broader way. And so, like an example that I use when I talk to a lot of restoration contractors is here at MTSU, we have career fairs throughout the year, and we'll have about 175 construction companies that come to recruit our students. Of the I'm going to ask you guys a question. So, of the 175 contractors that come to our campus to recruit our students, how many do you think are restoration contractors?
3.
3? There's 1.
1.
Right? And this is something I've been sharing with the industry for years now. And I talk to other construction management programs across the country, and it's a very similar showing, right? And so the problem, so again, we all go to these conferences, we all hear from restoration contractors that, hey, we don't have enough people in the pipeline. Well, we don't have enough restoration contractors showing up to these events to educate young people. Every year we have a freshman class that comes in studying construction and concrete. And we have employers that are here on day one that are engaging with our students. They're coming and talking to classrooms. They're having socials. They're bringing them donuts. They're bringing them sandwiches. They're hiring them for internships. They're getting involved with classes. They're being a part of. They're joining teams where they're assessing student work and investing in the students. And then what happens is the students get that for 4 years, and then they go work for all of these contractors, right? That are commercial contractors, that are home builders, right? Production home builders, custom home builders. And it's really hard if restoration contractors aren't showing up to compete for that talent, they're not going to get the talent, right? And so that's one of the biggest challenges that I put out to restoration contractors. Let's do more to show, and I know there are restoration contractors that are doing it across the country. But what I will say is based on my experience and what I know, we don't have enough of them going out there and doing that, right? And I think if we were to do that in a much bigger way, we could see more. And this is a little bit, this is a lot of bias coming out of my mouth right now, but I love the restoration industry. I think it's an awesome industry. And I think if we were to put some of the best restoration contractors up against some of the best home builders at career events, I'm very confident that a restoration contractor could outsell a home builder, a commercial contractor on a career in the restoration industry. And I think sometimes restoration contractors will send people out to talk to young people that might not be the best people. So we also need to think about who we're sending out to deliver this message to young people, right? They need to have a genuine love and care for young people. They need to know how to smile. They need to know how to, not think, because every industry, no matter what you do, there's always going to be difficult things. We need to not be so focused on just the challenges and the things that I think we get burned out on a daily basis. There's a positive message that can reach these young people. And, and I think every industry, if you go talk to a commercial construction company, one of the things that they might be burned out on is, we have to deal with delay claims, and I'm trying to fight with an owner on liquidated damages, and or they have bond claims, and all of these things that a commercial contractor can get jaded on, and that could just turn them off about their job. Well, there's still a lot of great things about being a commercial contractor, and I think for restoration contractors, sometimes they get too focused on the challenges within the industry. I know for restoration contractors right now, it's cash flow and payments, right? They're looking at all of their aging and the turnaround that it's taken for them to get paid. I know restoration contractors are looking at the relationships with carriers and TPAs, and sometimes when you think about all the stressors and pressures, it could be something that's not a whole lot of fun to look at, and they might think that they have a very grim career prospect to share with young people, but I would argue that there's a very positive career prospect that they have to share with young people, and we need professionals out there sharing that message and sharing the great things about the industry.
IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. Association sponsors are the Environmental Information Association. EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. All right, we're back with the second half of our interview. We've got Dr. Jacob Avila. Cliff, why don't you go ahead and start the second half?
Thanks, Joe. Okay.
Well, let's see if we got Dr. Jake back first.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Ah,
Yes.
much better. Yeah.
Perfect.
The gremlins are in the computers today. I can't type either. There must be an update that is like sometimes when Microsoft updates everything, it kind of screws up its mixing and matching. But go ahead, Cliff.
Jake, Jake, can you tell us a little bit about the concrete program at MTSU and how it's evolved, why it's so successful, and how you kind of want to model your program after it?
Right. Yeah, so it started about 25 years ago, and the concrete industry had recognized years ago that they needed more people in the pipeline. And in a similar way, at every level of these concrete companies, everything from technicians to project managers to estimators to operations managers, general managers, company CEOs, there was just a huge need. And so in order to help meet that need, the concrete industry formed, and they came to MTSU first. And so we were the first and are the flagship concrete industry management program in the country. Since our program started, there's now programs at New Jersey Institute of Technology, University of North Texas, Chico State in California, South Dakota State University, and then we have MTSU. So in all, there's 5. And at this national level, the industry gets together and they decide when and where and how they're going to launch new programs. And what's amazing is that movement, which was really initiated by the industry, has done so much for the concrete industry. And so in that time, graduates have filled every role within concrete companies. New concrete companies have been started by entrepreneurs who have graduated from these programs. They have about an 84% retention rate. So for people who graduate from these concrete industry management programs, and for those that are tracked, an 84% retention rate is awesome. And I think one of the reasons why that happens is because as students enter college and they're trying to decide on a major, and again, going back to the example that I had earlier, from day one, our freshmen are being introduced to home builders and commercial contractors and concrete companies. And so I think going into their degree programs, they're making more informed decisions, thinking about what they want to do with their career. And then they have 4 years. And sometimes students end up switching majors and they go, major in finance, or they go major in something else. And that's totally fine. We want them to do what's going to be good for them. But for the students that stay, they're committing to a career, and it's something that they're excited about. And so having the opportunity to make a more informed decision on the front end, I think, is one of the things that really lends itself to students graduating from the program and then staying in the industry, right? That's just my opinion. But so we see that happening. We see about 100% placement rate. So we have multiple students who have multiple job offers, sometimes a year before they graduate, right? And then they come into my office all the time and they're stressed out because they have 4 job offers and they don't know which one. And I tell them I don't feel sorry for them at all. And that, it's a tough decision. But we do have some students as well who, they work for a construction company, and the construction company will say, hey, what will it take for you to just come work for us now full time? And so it's that kind of pressure that some of these, so the demand is really high. And as we've been talking about doing this for the restoration industry, we point back to concrete as a model, right? Because it's something where the idea was born from industry. The industry partnered with MTSU, and it was for a very similar reason. They wanted to educate more young people on opportunities within the concrete industry, and they wanted to fill a pipeline of qualified people that could have long, meaningful careers in the concrete industry. And it's really no different for the restoration industry, right? Restoration industry is voiced a very similar pain. We need a fuller pipeline of young people. We need to invest in more young people, right? At every level. Kind of, university is part of it, but again, high school students, community college students, trade schools, universities, people outside the industry. We just need to do a better job of communicating a message that these are great career opportunities to young people. And so the concrete industry has really developed, there's an advisory board, and they really have developed a great roadmap for us to follow as a restoration industry. And obviously we would tailor it to what's going to meet the restoration industry best. But the other point that I make when I talk about this is, if you were to look at just the size of these industries, right? So it's estimated right now that the concrete industry is about $120 billion a year industry, right? And for years now, when I've been going to these restoration conferences, I'll ask people, right, how big is the restoration industry? And I know RIA is doing great work right now with getting us NAICS codes, and that's going to really help us, I think, get more detailed in understanding where the numbers are exactly. But I'll ask you guys another question. So where is the industry in terms of its size if we look at overall market?
Lift, I'm going to have that. I'll pass that one on to you or Pete. Pete, if you know, put it in the chat.
I would, there are companies that are doing billions of dollars. I mean, single
Yeah.
companies, within this industry. So the fact that you have single companies doing that sort of volume, it would seem to me, I mean, if I had to make a scientific wild ass guess, a swag, I'd say $100 million or $100 billion. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say that's what it is. I mean, look. I mean, you have billions of dollars when these hurricanes hit in terms of damage. So, just one event. So, and,
Yeah.
somebody has to put that, somebody has to put that back together. But
Yeah.
here's one thing that, you're talking about getting these people at all levels, recruiting these people at all levels, and you grew up in the business, so you understand, what's involved. Some of it's dirty, some of it's sweaty, some of it's not necessarily fun, and so on and so forth. And, if I was going to, and I think the best and most talented people in this industry are the most experienced people, the people that have done every job, know it from start to finish, grew up in it, and so on and so forth. And it just seems to me that today, I could see people coming out of this program and, well, I want to be an estimator or something like that, or I want to be a project manager. And I could see them not really, I could see them being maybe a better estimator than a project manager because they really haven't necessarily done it, and I'm not sure that what you're going to learn in school in terms of project management is going to translate, when you're working on catastrophe losses and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and that's really the case for I think anyone going into any career in any niche, right? So like an educational degree program is going to give you foundational baseline knowledge, but for a student that graduates from a commercial construction program or even a civil engineering program, right? They're going to go build their first dam for the first time or their first bridge for the first time, and there's a lot of things within the context of even an engineering degree program that's going to provide a baseline education, but the practical reality of putting together a bridge and what all goes into that is a whole another thing, right? That transcends the baseline education that they got in their engineering program.
All right. Before we go to the roundup, I want to get a couple quick questions in here. One is, give us your best 2-minute elevator pitch as to why the industry should support the MTSU program. I mean, why is it important?
Absolutely. Okay, so can I backtrack 1 second?
Certainly.
Okay, so going back to the market size of the restoration industry, right? So we look at concrete, 120 billion, right? Restoration on the conservative side, we're looking at just over 200 billion, right? Some estimates, depending on catastrophes on an annual basis, we all know that can cause a $50 billion swing, at least in some instances, sometimes well above that, right? Jeff Moore just posted on LinkedIn this morning, right? So through RIA, I think it was his personal account, but he said that the restoration industry is about a $250 billion a year industry, right? So we're looking at an industry that is twice the size of the concrete industry. And the concrete industry, again, grassroots, the industry saw the need. They raised $2 million a year for student scholarships. And that's to help young people, high school students, community college students, university students get educated on the concrete industry so they can have long, meaningful careers in the concrete industry. So I wanted to go back to that just for a second.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's pretty impressive numbers.
And so when we look at just the elevator pitch, I mean, what I've been sharing with people is if as an industry, if having more young people being educated and developing the next generation of restorers is important to the industry, then it's something that we all need to take a part in, right? And I think again, this is not something that one university or two universities or three or five universities are going to solve. This is something that the industry as a whole needs to take an interest in if educating that next generation is really important. right? And so it means that we're all going to need to get out there. We're all going to need to find opportunities to educate high school students. And again, one of the reasons why it's important that we look at what the concrete industry does is every academic year we have here at MTSU hundreds of high school students in our parking lot where we bus them in. There's concrete equipment all over this section of our campus. They have the opportunity to get in and ride along in concrete trucks. They get to see how the concrete manufacturing process works. They talk to concrete industry professionals. They come into our classrooms. They get to crush concrete and learn about testing the compressive strength of concrete. And I think as an industry, the restoration industry, we need to do similar things. We need to provide similar learning opportunities where young people can come and see what goes on in a flood house and just learn about the exciting opportunities that exist within the restoration industry.
Cliff, before we go to roundup, let me get you get one more in.
I'm good, Joe, actually.
All right. Now the second one is, can you suggest any initiatives and a reasonable timeline for the industry, which will create an awareness for and help to raise funds for the second act, make that second act a reality?
Yeah, so right now we're trying to raise $1 million to get the program started. Overall, we're trying to raise $3 million. The first $1 million will get our faculty appointment in place to where we can actually hit the ground and develop the coursework that we've already proposed to the state of Tennessee. Right, so those proposals are already there, but in order for us to get it going, we need the $1 million. The remaining $2 million, we want to use that for student scholarships. And so we want students to be able, and the $3 million in total will never be less than that, right? And as we bring in that money, something that I also share with people is quite often universities will take overhead off the top of money that's brought in, right? So for anyone that's been following Elon Musk and what he did with Doge, right? Some of what we learned through that process is that a lot of institutions are taking 40 to 60% off the top of money that's brought in.
More.
And so it's really the remaining amount that actually goes towards the cause. MTSU, our policies are 31.3% and 42%, depending on the money that comes in. For this initiative, and this just goes to show how supportive the university is in this effort, the university has agreed to 0% overhead. So no overhead is being taken out. The money goes straight to foundation, and then what funds it is the money that the interest that we make on that money. So we get about a 4% return. So it will never, ever be less than the money that we bring in, and 100% of the money that we bring in will actually go towards restoration and advancing this. And so for that $2 million, that's to send students to conferences. We want to send them to the restoration industry conferences. We want them going to all the conventions. We want them engaging with industry. We want to provide opportunities for them to earn scholarships, right? And through an advisory board, we'll have a scholarship process where students could apply for scholarship. And our advisory board will help us make decisions on, those types of things. So scholarships to go to conferences, scholarships to get IICRC certifications, scholarships for them to become CRs. And so, I think when we're looking at support, that's really going to be the biggest piece. And in exchange, so the university is going to match that. Over the first 5 years of the program, the university is going to contribute the equivalent of about $4.7 million in exchange for that. So again, the university is committed to this effort, and they're very supportive of it. What we want to see and I understand the university's perspective on this, but we want to make sure that the industry is committed to it, and this is something the industry really wants. And one of the best metrics for that is the industry contributions, because we have had instances where, like years ago, we had an electrical construction management, right? The electrical industry came to us and said, hey, we want to start this program. We started, and the program just struggled for a long time. We ended up having to get rid of it, right? So every time we start a program like this, it's a substantial investment on the account of the university. And so, we want to make sure that this is something that the industry really wants. And even when I go talk at all of our conferences across the country, I I don't think there's been one that where I haven't. I always end on the question of, is this something we should continue doing? And I haven't had a single person say that this is a bad idea or we shouldn't do this or do something different. 100% of the feedback has been, hey, let's keep doing this. Let's keep walking down that path.
Very good. All right, let's go to the roundup, Grayson. Bring in the restoration industry global watchdog, Pete Consigli, and historian. We got a his title's getting longer as time goes on here. All right, the roundup brought to us by Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. Pete, let's see if we've got you in here and take it on. Take it over for us, buddy.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So Grayson, am I can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
you're good.
Yeah, okay. So Jake, before I kind of weigh in with my roundup comments, there's a couple of questions I'd like you to address that were on our original show narrative in the interview. The first one is I'd like you to share with the audience, even though you mentioned Les early on in the first half, share a little bit what's going on with Les's gathering of the Eagles events that he did last year. I was scheduled to go to the one in November, but it got postponed because of all the Florida hurricanes, and then I had a conflict with my annual winter break, so I couldn't go in February. But I have it on my calendar for next year. I think it's in January. Talk a little bit about that and what Les is doing in that regard. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if we 100% touch on this, but Cliff had mentioned this to me in a call the other day. You know, one of the points that Randy has brought up that was a big challenge at Purdue is that it was hard for the restoration industry to compete salary-wise with the general construction industry and the other programs that they had at Purdue. And I imagine that may or may not be an issue at Middle Tennessee with your construction management programs there, your concrete people, etc. I think the concrete model that you've created is good for restoration. We've already talked about that. So why don't you just comment on those two items, and then I'll give some other thoughts in general. Number one, address a little bit about gathering the Eagles, inform us a little. Cliff will put them in the blog notes that'll be going out. And then the second thing is, what are your thoughts on the challenges with the industry meeting salary to the other competitive industries under the big umbrella at any university, for that matter, in the construction management? So go ahead, Jake.
Sure. So the Gathering of Eagles, the next one is January 27th through 29th of 26 here at MTSU. And that's something that we put on with Les Cunningham and Business Networks, where we have restoration contractors that come and we have workshops and sessions. So we make sure that there's value for the industry, right? So we have special speakers. We've talked about everything from mergers and acquisitions. This next year, we're looking at having some instructors come in to provide continuing education credits for anyone that's looking for just maintaining their industry certifications. So that's something. So we bring practical value to industry, bring them together, a lot of networking that goes on. The biggest and main ask that we have of the industry is to engage students while they're here, educate them on the industry, educate them on the just career opportunities within restoration, take them to dinner, take them to lunch. And that's just been an awesome thing. So of our students that have participated in that, I need to look at where our numbers are, but we've had a high placement rate of students that have attended that and then gone into restoration, which has been really, really neat to see. So we invite everybody to come be a part of that. And then with regard to the salaries, so the average salary, I believe right now for our outgoing students is somewhere between $65,000 and $70,000 a year. And I would say the range is we have some students that will graduate and they're making $50,000 a year, and some, on the other end of the spectrum are getting $85,000 a year salary offers. And so that's the general range. As I've drilled down and talked to restoration contractors about that, the feedback that I've gotten recently is that's not a problem. And so, I am curious to get more feedback on that. So if anyone that listens to this, if they have a different thought on that, like if they feel that the average pay is 40,000 or 45,000, I could see that being a challenge, right? But if we're talking salaries, mid 50s to mid 60s for somebody starting in estimating or project management, I think based on the numbers that we have, I think we're competitive. But if anyone knows different, I'd love to hear from them.
Okay, Jake. Well, I think the challenges that existed years ago in the heyday of the program at Purdue with Randy, there probably was a disparity. I don't think the disparity exists as much because I think the restoration industry evolved. I think the salaries went up. The other thing is that it depends on what the competition is. So a lot of the programs coming out of Purdue are in healthcare, the big home builders, and some of those, and some of the salaries just tended to be a little bit higher. But if you get into more of the trade practice stuff, possibly like concrete restoration and maybe some others, then maybe there's less disparity. I guess the one thing, the one thought I have when I went through, visited the campus, and you just happened to be on vacation at the time, but Dr. Nicholas gave me a great tour. We spent a few hours going through there. I really I enjoyed going into the research lab where they do they have the big concrete mixer in there, and they do a lot of research for that. And one of the things where I think if we hit the million and this program gets kicked off, where I think the industry can help support is to have a lab put in to do restoration research. That was actually part of the original agreement with Purdue with Randy, but unfortunately we never made. We just missed the total pledges, and if we had hit that, there would have been matching funds and would have been a lot bigger pool, and that was a little disappointing. But having said all that, I think everything is a process in life, and this is when we put the show together. We talk about it. It's our second act. The first act was well over 15 years at Purdue. Maybe it probably was 20 years. The process with Purdue started when Drew Brees was the quarterback of Purdue. They just announced he's going into the Football Hall of Fame, right? And I think him and Larry Fitzgerald both got voted in the first round. They just announced it the other day. So stop and think about that. That was in the mid-'90s. And I was part of a group with the pioneering guy, Bob Bonwell, and Cliff may make a couple of comments when we closed the roundabout, who it was his dream and vision to bring the restoration industry to a major university. And the end that he had was his first cousin was the dean of the school. So it's good to have that kind of influence, right?
Yeah.
And there were quite a few of us through many, many years before Bob then went out and raised the money, similar to what Les is trying to help you do. And that was a 10-year process. And everything that you talked about that you want to do, the industry has already done at Purdue and with REA and IACRC. We've had internships. Kurt Bolderman, who's alive, offered $25 a day for the students to go take the ISCC courses. We set up student trips to the convention to help with the staff and then go visit. We did all of that. So the model is there that the industry's done. I think we can not only learn lessons from Purdue, which you and Randy talked, but also you've actually done it for 25 years in Middle Tennessee with the concrete. So I'm very interested in that. One of the things that I'm going to suggest when I give my higher education report to the IACRC is that, and I've been pretty open about this, the Gathering of the Eagles, and I told Les, is great. It's an industry thing to go to the campus and do everything you talked about. But what I think the industry should do additionally, okay, is put a group together of a leader group, from IICRC, REA, those kind of people, the big, large networks. And they should come out to the campus in early October. As a matter of fact, they won't be able to do it this year. It's next week, where you have the university has a number of things going on. They have a golf tournament, and they also have their annual fall, kind of like job fair, career fair. At Purdue, they had two. They had one in the September, was always big, and then they had one in February. Not that anybody wanted to go to Indiana in the middle of February, but I attended those for years. I used to do guest lectures and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the purpose of doing that is not so much from a raising money standpoint, but it's a learning standpoint for leadership in the industry to watch, meet with the concrete people, see how it operates under the big umbrella. Now, we at Purdue, they call it the CAC, which is the Construction Advisory Council. I remember talking with Tom about this on campus. You guys use a different name, but it does the same function. What's it called, Jake? It's Industrial Board of Council.
There's an industrial advisory board, and then for the
Right.
concrete, they call them the patrons.
Right, an industrial concrete council, industrial council. At Purdue and other uses, they call it the Construction Advisory Council. Actually, REA had a comp seat there for years. I used to go to those meetings. I actually was still on the mailing list. And over the years, I've had a lot of our major companies go there, DKI, ATI, Rainbow, quite a few of them, even some of the TPAs, Code Blue back in the day. And a lot of local restoration people, some of the Invercon and Belfort people, they would go to the job fair. And at Purdue, the partner connection was the demolition industry, which got in a little bit before us, very related to restoration. Now in Middle Tennessee, I see the partnering group being the concrete industry, because concrete's very important to people in restoration and flooring and dealing with moisture. The ITESM committees are working on a lot of this kind of stuff. So in any case, so I guess what I'm getting at is this, Jake. I'm optimistic, but it's a grind, and the industry has to have to want it, like you said. That first act that we had with Purdue, it had different degrees of success. I think they're still doing something with the program, but Randy retired. Mark Sharetta's counterpart, who headed up the demolition program and worked with their industry association, he retired before Randy. I don't know who's there. Cliff, myself, and a few others. We got Randy a named professorship there before he retired. I don't know if they're still honoring that. It's kind of a thing that kind of comes from the university. But in any case, so now it's the time to move on. The next generation has to pick up the ball and has to advocate for it. I know that we have a couple of the big national players who've made a 10-year commitment. We need more. I also think that we need the small grassroots guys. If you can get all the restoration members and all the IICRC certified firms, these companies, if they can make a small donation every year, that adds up. And they have an interest in all this too, just as much as the larger companies, for estimators, project managers, people of that nature, if they want to grow their companies and manage their companies if they're big. So, and you're right, there are the universities that have been, there are programs there that people come in industry. I know Michigan State, Ohio State, Texas A&M, they're the big dog in the field, So the partnering of all these universities, I think, is important. I guess I'll close with saying here's my analogy for our industry, Cliff, for the block. When I look at the path and the road that the first act to the second act with Purdue and now Middle Tennessee, it's analogous in my mind to the conversation that had been led under the RIA umbrella that started in 2006. And that was where we had an open and constructive dialogue with the insurance industry to try to create a better relationship between restoration companies and insurance companies. It started with the thing called the Donnybrooks. Then there were a bunch of debates and position papers and publishing called the Closing the Gap. Then there was this thing called the Narrowing the Divide. That was over 15 years. That laid the groundwork for Mark Springer to write an article in a series called The Industry Needs to Take a Stand. And then he wrote an article called The Greatest Need that led to the forming of the AGA committee. And now Mark is the carrier advocate. Well, this has taken 25-year run through a succession of a number of people that just keep pushing down the field, hoping that the goalposts don't get moved. And we're having success under a group of succeeding leaders. And I know a lot of the leaders that they're at RAA and I think at IACRC now, they're focused in on trying to find out who are the next people that are going to succeed and take over the leadership to carry on these legacies of guys like me and others that took it from Marty King, Claude Blackburn, Lloyd Weaver, people like that. And there's a whole group, Jeff Bishop, Lee Pemberton, I could keep going. Well, who are the next group of guys? And these are guys who I think are in their 40s, right? Or so. They've already put in 20 years. They made their bones, but they're going to be around another 20. They got to pick up the ball. They got to push it forward. They're out there. And so just like we have to close the gap and create a better relationship with the insurance carriers, and that's happening, there are two things that the government does to recognize industry as a business or a trade or a profession. The first one is you have to have a body of knowledge. The industry has that. It took us 7 years to develop it. It's been out for about 10 years now. And the second one is a connection with an institute of higher learning. That was Purdue, now it's Middle Tennessee. And that is, I actually wrote about this in the cover story of CNR 215 after Marty King passed. It was the memorial issue. And I talked about this because in 1971, Marty's dream for the industry was that one day the field of damage repair, he called it, would become a profession. And now that we've got the RAA's pulled NAICS codes, it used to be called standard industrial codes, that identifies restoration with the government. Carpet cleaning's had one of those for like 50 years, long before everything else. And so has the construction trade. Now restoration does. And it probably is close to a couple $100 billion business. It's a moving target based on storm seasons, of course. But my feeling is that we have to get advocates that are going to take that message, because there's been a lot of us that have been advocating for many years. Sometimes it falls in deaf ears. Sometimes it just gets kind of stuck in the mud. But we're building a momentum. Les has done some fabulous work there. And I really applaud him for that. I've had a couple of good meetings with him. And so, you know, I'll look to in any way that I can to help support the program. But it is a grind. It's a slow process. It ain't going to happen overnight, but we just keep moving the ball down the field. So anyway, I thank you for your passion, Jake, because I could just tell you just love this stuff. You love it from a kid growing up in the business with your dad, and you moved in academia. I can just tell the way you talk about the students and everything else that you're the right guy, and I hope it's going to be successful for you. So I will, before Joe closes out and asks you for final comments, I want to turn it over to Cliff, because I know Cliff has a few things that he may want to say, and I think he wants to talk a little bit about where it all started with Bob's dream. So Cliff, over to you, buddy.
Well, I think you covered it real well, Pete, but, you know, thinking back, you know, Bob got, if I'm not mistaken, I think there were a total of 15 people. And I think each one of these. 10.
It was 10.
No, I thought we had a rate. No,
you had 10 who.
Okay. 10. Okay. Got it.
10
okay.
who donated 15 a year for 10 years. That was 150,000.
Correct.
And that would be 1.5 million. And then there
Correct.
was the matching funds.
The matching funds. Right. Yeah. And I was one of the people that did it, and Claude Blackburn was another. And I'm trying to think, Bob Bonwell was another. And
DKI.
No, Pete, I was just saying individuals. Okay, so we did it as we did it as individuals. Okay, and then then there were companies and so on and so on and so forth. But and I'm not sure exactly why it fell apart. I don't know who didn't keep their commitment and so on and so forth. But I suspect. But I think the big thing that
I know.
Okay,
some of them just went out of business. And just
right.
the dynamic change. I don't think it was anything bad. They just ran out of money.
You know, one of the things that Jake said is he was talking about this overhead business and that, you know, Elon Musk discovered, you know, your estimates were kind of low. He had some that were like 80 and 90% overhead. And I suspect that Purdue, you know, had pretty high overhead. And, you know, the fact that you're able to get MTSU, you know, to do what they're doing, I think it shows that they're committed. And I'm not so sure that Purdue was committed as much as we were, and as much as Randy was. I mean, that's just my opinion. But I think that you are the right guy. I think that, times have changed. I think people will recognize it. And I think that's one way to do it, to get people to, commit to make a donation, whether it's $1,000 a year for 5 years or whatever it is, whatever they can afford. I think, there probably is not only big money donors out there, but there's probably some grassroots donors out there as well. And I think that people like to be invested. It's an investment. And I think that the more people you can get to invest in it, the more successful it's going to be. But, I can see it, I can see it.
Yeah. Well, look, if you could get 5,000 companies to put $100 a year up, that's a big chunk of change too. A lot of these smaller companies.
Right,
and,
right.
I think that, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I think the big thing that Middle Tennessee can learn from, they can learn from the experience and the challenges that we had with Purdue, and they could leverage that now in the second act. I think that's a big part of this. So anyway, good luck, Jake.
Dr.
Thanks,
Jake,
Jake.
before we go, we always like to give you the final word. Anything we missed, anything you'd like to add?
No, if anyone needs to reach out to me, is there a way that we'll share my contact information, or should I just
sure.
say it?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll do both.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so please reach out. I'd love to talk to anyone. And I just want to thank you guys for all the good work that you do for the industry. I think what you do is awesome. And I really appreciate the time to just share all of this.
Well,
Hey,
you.
Jake, Cliff can put your contact details in the blog, and that
Yes.
goes out to the whole database. That'll be the easiest way to do it.
And we'll put it on the website too if you send it to me. This is Radio Joe Hughes saying thanks to this week's guest, Dr. Jacob Avila. I also want to thank my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Slotnick, the Restoration Watchdog, Pete Consigli, our engineer, Grayson Gone Fish and Fisher, most importantly, our sponsors and our loyal audience. We couldn't do the show without you. We'll see you next Friday at noon with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.